Okay, hello everyone. I am, unlike the other presenters that we've had today, I'm coming from a commercial company that builds software, music software. And our company really focuses on trying to incorporate all of the latest advances from music information retrieval and music informatics and cognitive research as well. And we try to incorporate all of this research into our software functionality. And really, it begins with the representation that we use to represent our MIDI information. Because if you consider most of the other commercially available software, whether it's Ableton or Pro Tools, if they were going to get into this kind of stuff, they're still using the standard representations of unstructured MIDI or standard notation or just audio signals. And really those representations have some limitations on using some of these informatic techniques and data mining. Dave, our original founder and inventor, came up with a representation that we think is really well suited to taking MIDI files and incorporating this kind of cognitive research as well as all the music informatic techniques. So this is you'll notice the 2 in the title. This is a sequel of sorts. We presented at the inaugural CogMIR last year. And one of the benefits of a kind of conference like this is sort of the networking. We were fortunate that one of the attendees from last year sort of met us for the first time and saw what was being presented and ended up being corralled into our development team and actually built a lot of the things that we were working on at the time and gesturing towards, but hopefully we can show you how we've progressed since then and some of the things we've been able to implement in the software over the last year. Last year when we presented even our first version of our Liquid Loops drum machine was still in a text box version, and we had no physiological data. We had no real corpus in our format, so much of the things we were talking about were just from a schematic point of view and from our general interest in building on the promise that we saw within the representation. Even though we presented some of the stuff last year, it's quite a new audience we have here, so in order to understand some of the things that we are going to do with the software, we're going to give sort of a recap and review of some of the basic concepts that are in operation in our representation, so that you'll be able to follow the demonstrations that we cover afterwards and see more clearly what's going on. So this is sort of a brief overview of what we're going to cover. I will cover some of the background concepts, like I said, and then I'll show some of the components that we use. We face the problem of how to organize them and navigate them for either analytical context or for assisted composition context. So I'll show some of the first attempts we did at organizing these things, but that's an ongoing problem, and you'll see a couple of ways in which we're going to represent the components. After that, I will cover one last thing, and that is showing how the representation can do reductions of content from MIDI files. And that's sort of a good precursor for how those components can be used for experiments and for statistics. After that, we'll get into the more fun stuff, and we'll have Dave demonstrate the building of a beat in our rhythm synthesizer. He'll show you just the standard procedure that we're using in our first version, and following that, we'll call up Matthew and Natasha again to show you some of the new widgets that they have on their poster incorporated into our software in a prototype sort of way to show you some of these new techniques that we would like to introduce into commercial software. So, some background. We'll start off with something very familiar, just notes. That's how we represent a note in our software. The diamond on the bottom represents the note event, and the bar at the top represents velocity. The taller the bar, the greater the velocity of the event. I don't think I'm going to lose the room on this new representation. Now there's 2 other concepts that we use throughout the software and throughout the representation. Those are groups and positions within groups. So let's look at groups. Basically, we use groups of 2s and 3s as much as we can at various levels to represent structure in a MIDI file and give it structure that it doesn't have in its raw state. So blue shaded icons will be groups of 2, and anytime you see a red shaded icon, it'll be a group of 3. The next concept is positions. So you'll see that these groups collect different slots or positions, and they're shaded differently. So the darkly shaded position or slot is a strong or in position. The most lightly shaded position is the out position or the weakest position, and the ternary positions have a mid as well. Beat forms. Okay, so these are the groups of 2s and 3s that capture note events in a MIDI file. This one here is a single, and we call it a through because basically it inherits the activation from a lower level of grouping of 2s and 3s. I'll get to that in a second. Beat forms last just 1/8 of a bar. So each beat has one of these beat forms, each 8th note beat. They can collect events or they can collect absences of events too. So you can see that there are rest positions here where there isn't a note collected, but the notes that are collected fit best into this grouping structure. So you can see that there are various beat forms that can capture 8th notes, 16th notes, 24th notes. There's other beat forms that combine groups of 2s and 3s to create the hybrids or collect 32nd notes up to 48ths and 32nds in hybrid combinations. This is a bar form. Bar forms used to collect beat form are used to collect beat forms as they occur across a bar of music. So they also organize things into groups of 2s and 3s in the same way that beat forms do. As you'll see there, bar form is 1 bar long. Each of the beat forms is 1/8 note. So bar forms collect beat forms, which collect and organize note events in the MIDI signal. All right, so the other problem we have, if you run through all those available permutations for bar forms and beat forms, we end up with 256 bar form activation patterns and 99 beat forms. They're fairly sizable sets, but not gigantic. This gets a lot bigger if we get into longer time signatures. But this bar here actually represents all of the 256 stimuli that were presented to listeners in the cognitive study that Naresh and Frank and the Smart Lab carried out. And we'll show some of that, some things about that in the demonstrations. So some features about how those maps are organized. We have family groupings. So if all of the events are just in groups of 2, they occur in this quadrant of the wheel, bar form wheel. If they come in activations of groups of 3 and a group of 2, then they're in this quadrant, and so forth for the other quadrants. Within a quadrant, we divide these into 2 different 8ths. The one on this side is representing bar forms of this family that have an event or a note or an activity in the first position, the first beat of the bar. These activations in here lack that, and they have any other combination across the other slots. Another organizational feature is that activities go up. So there are fewer activity locations in the bar forms down the center of the wheel. As you go towards the edge, there are more activities. So that wheel can help you sort of navigate if you have a particular sort of activation pattern in mind. Once you get used to this, you can actually find these things fairly quickly. The beat form map is organized in much the same way. It's not so divided into quadrants, but here we have one small section here, and the same way that the beat bar forms are organized with, depending on whether they have a beat at the initial port, whether they have an activity at the initial beat of that form, or whether they don't. Okay, and now let's get into that third section and show you. So this is one bar that's been taken from a MIDI file. It's fairly complex rhythmic information. I don't even know if I want to try and sound it out. I'll avoid that. But that's the way it ends up getting analyzed by our system. And if we break that down, we notice that even though it looks fairly complex, and there are a total of 8 different notes or activities, some of those beat forms are the same. We notice the ones at the beginning and the end are the same. And the 2 sets of 2 beat forms in the center are also co-occurrences of the same beat form. So from those 8 notes, we really only have 3 different beat forms, and they come from only 2 different families. So if we bring the maps back in, we could decompose a music molecule into its component parts. Here's the bar form and beat forms. We can show where that beat form is located. Sorry, where that bar form is located on the bar form map. Here it is zoomed in, or where each of these beat forms are located on our beat form map. And I think that should set the stage good enough for Mr. Dave Beckford to give you a demonstration of how these components come back together in a rhythmic synthesizer context.
Now I'm about to build a medium with loops. Okay, so Frank has been talking about Frank's been talking about generative or assisted compositions system. So this is really the spirit behind the Liquid Loops series of products is to provide a guided composition experience as opposed to the current pre-production experience which everybody uses, which is you do, where I think I've inspired by some idea and it's going to come out and it's going to be wonderful. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. For those who doesn't, we have some other options, right? So going up, so we're going to bring up the generator panel. I know, but I have
So we should have a bigger Mac.
Hmm?
I'm like computer. How do we get past that?
Yeah. Switch out Mac, so I'll roll your
Take off
introduction.
Gen, activate a bar.
Yeah, but I still need to.
Sorry, that's gonna come up with. Right. Okay, so things are open.
So Liquid Loops works a lot better if you have a separate monitor that can open things up all the way on.
You should unmirror displays.
That's another option. Don't mirror your display.
That would be really. But then I would see it. You can do it.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're here. This is good. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a bit of kick drum pattern here. So we looped on the first bar. So so the wheel is here. I will zoom in on this. And so I'm gonna use, rather than I can hunt through the wheel, but another way we can just go through things is just add the steps to the step sequencer. So if we keep that playing. Actually, I'm gonna do it from here.
Need a second.
Okay, so starting off with a kick pattern. So I'm going to switch to a snare pattern. Now, chances are I'm going to probably want something with a 2 and 4 snare. So I can activate something in those positions. And that's okay. But what I might want to look for is something that is close to that, but is a slight variation. So if you'll notice in the wheel, I have the current pattern which is selected, but I also have my nearest neighbors around things. So I'm going to select this one. So now I'm going to add a hat pattern.
Change your snare.
So now we can add a hi-hat with the correct sound. So if I play this together, so far I've just selected the vocabulary on the 8th level. So this is working with just 3 clicks. So I've made more music than I would have just by stepping things in. Unfortunately, it is not built. Your heads go back and forth, so let's try and do that with the beat 4 wheel. So now what we can do, we're on the hi-hat pattern, so we'll just solo that. So what we're gonna do is on this row here, which you can't see. So what I did, I added some elements to the all bin, and I did you can't see the result list right now, but those tiny arrows are pointing to different variations that have quickly been woven together by adding beat forms to different positions. So in this case, what I did, I added the vocabulary of an 8th note, in addition to the 8th note vocabulary, I added a 16th note. 16th notes to both positions, and now there's a list in this small green area that is actually hundreds of, it actually has a lot of variations. But if you can do this, you can also, so if we want, we can also add, we'll add triplets to the weaker positions. And now we can scroll through this list until we find some of those patterns with the triplets is one of those. So now we can just go through and audition the variations that we like. We can add elements to the vocabulary. What we can also do is the targeting not only works to distribute beat forms to their locations, but we can actually also manipulate the state of the notes. Right? So we can take all of the. Right now, I'm on the surface handler that's targeting all of the strong positions. So I'm going to increase the velocities on those. And I'm going to increase the velocity on all of the weak positions. I can take all of the elements from the weak positions and slide them back in time. also change up some things. We're gonna add some elements. So the more vocabulary we add, we can also get to different places which are off the beat. Right? So. Okay, and you know what? That's pretty much. Go ahead. Oh, oh, okay.
Hand things.
Yeah, we're gonna hand things over. So this is technology now where people can assemble these fairly quickly. However, even though like, all of your choices are laid out, the challenge is, well, which ones do I choose, right? Which bar forms, patterns go together, which with different types of genres, different types of instruments. So there's a whole bunch of information that we can attach onto this, and I'll hand this over to Matt to attach right now.
You can use that to build them.
Yeah.
That's just blow that away.
So, let's load up the same kit, start vanilla kit. And what I'm going to do here is load our beat seeker files, which will give us now a list of a number of genres. And let's select house for a minute. And what this will do is now when we select an instrument track and head over to our bar gen view, if we go to the bar form map, this will paint our bar form map based on what occurs most commonly within the house genre for kick patterns, because we're on a kick instrument. So as you can see, the far and away favorite is just
All over the floor.
house bumping music. And now let's head back to this menu. We can turn off static mode, and what this will allow us to do is from this starting point. So let's play this. From this starting point, whenever we select a new track, it will not only take into account the fact that it's a snare and look at what's most common for snare patterns, it'll also take into account everything else that occurs at the same time in this bar. So it's looking at this kick within our corpus and saying, in house music, with this kick going on, what's common for snare? And that's what's being put up here. So the most popular would be this, and this is nearby and also used quite frequently. Other options too. So now we can head to, say, a closed hi-hat. You can go to an open hi-hat as well. And as you can see in just a few clicks, I'm not much of a musician at all, and it sounds, I guess, a bit like house music. It's got the framework there. And so someone who is new with our software or just new to composing music can have set up from the start sort of guide for laying down basically the structural framework of a beat in any given genre. So perhaps just for contrast's sake, we can now, let's delete what we've made here. Switch over to maybe funk sounds good. And let's see, as you can see, a different set of sort of kicks are popular in funk. Before it was in house over here in this region. There were some more popular choices, but here we've got rhythms like this. For example, we've got a hand clap. Side stick. So yeah, it gives you a different sound than the house option did. And if I can just now introduce the this tool. As you can see, as I stretch and change the bounds of this box, what's highlighted on the wheel changes. So if you want to stick to perhaps more orderly stuff, you could guide in this way, and then follow the two's guidelines together. So perhaps go for this because it's both highlighted and still on the screen. And it further allows you to change up what you display on either axis, or lets you eliminate certain families on the wheel. Once again, just sort of constraining or guiding certain choices, but yeah. Any comments, Steve?
What's on the axis in case it's not clear?
Oh, yeah. So right now we've got an order and activity according to the study that Naresh was undertaking with users in terms of listening to all these rhythms and assigning cognitively their response in terms of orderliness and activity on a scale of 1 to 9. So that's what you're seeing here. We can show you a comparison of our in-house musicians, for example. So you could size the window to go into the regions where they both overlap. Or you could add a genre here. You could put hip hop up against jazz, for example. And here you can scroll over and it'll highlight this region here. What it is your cursor's over.
Do you guys have any summary comments before we take questions?
Go ahead.
Before you do the instructions.